In the vast landscape of survival horror games, there are very few peaks as high as that of Capcom's seminal Resident Evil series. From the very beginning, all the way back in 1996, Resident Evil has been a continuously evolving masterclass in terror. As a franchise, the RE games, for a while, were defined by slow, tense exploration of eerie, labyrinthian environments filled with zombies and mutant creatures who, while killable, would prove of vast detriment to your very limited health and resources should you choose to fight them. In exploring these terrifying places, you'd come to discover a series of locked doors and puzzle rooms whose solutions and keys could usually be found elsewhere in the map, leading to your escape from the mansion or police station or secret lab, feeling like a massive puzzle box that must be solved, all the while being hunted by an insane variety of creepy creatures that you're more keen to run away from than to fight, unless you absolutely have to. So, if that's the general vibe of the Resident Evil games, then what the fuck is this?
After what she's done to us, how many of our men are dead because of that bitch?
I'm right there with you, Captain. But your personal vendetta isn't gonna get us anywhere.
Resident Evil 6.
It's awesome, that's what. But it's not really Resident Evil, at least not as we've come to know it so far. To figure out how things got so off the rails here, we have to go back to 2005 with the Resident Evil 4. RE4 may be a beloved classic and an all-around fantastic game, but it's also the beginning of what would be considered by many to be the downfall of the series, at least until RE7 came along and revived it. But why is that? With Resident Evil 4, Shinji Mikami, the creator of the series, wanted to try something totally new. After several failed prototypes, one of which ended up being reworked to become the Devil May Cry series, the team at Capcom finally ended up with the Resident Evil 4 we know today. And with it, they practically invented the third-person over-the-shoulder camera and aiming with the right stick control layout that has become the new standard in modern gaming. This new camera and combat scheme was to accommodate a faster, more action-focused take on horror, where the scares would come not from needing to sneak around small groups of zombies as you navigate a big puzzle mansion, but instead from being overwhelmed by hordes of ganados and large open areas with variable terrain and verticality that means you can be ambushed from any angle. The massive mainstream success of Resident Evil 4 would spur on Capcom to transition the series from the creeping, slow-paced dread of the first three games to the more bombastic and fast-paced action horror found in 4, 5, and 6. It would seem as though Resident Evil had entirely lost its way, all but abandoning its survival horror roots in favor of aping the Call of Duty-led trends of its time. And at that time, I'd have been inclined to agree with that popular opinion. But after letting the game marinate in the old noggin for nearly a decade, and following the pivot back to the scares and the significantly more horror-oriented Resident Evils 7 and 8, as well as the remake series, I've grown an unexpected appreciation for the sillier, more over-the-top style of Resident Evil's action era, with 6 being undoubtedly the silliest of the bunch. And that extravagance and willingness to go all out with the spectacle and set pieces are what really carves out a special place in my heart for this game. Knowing that the series is in a good place now, and that the crazy action isn't a permanent thing, makes me look back at it all a lot more fondly. You can really tell that the developers at Capcom really wanted to go all out with this one, creating what feels like a massive finale for all the storylines of the series thus far. You've got 4 separate but interweaving campaigns that all flesh out a globe-spanning story from the perspectives of fan-favorite characters from across the series, some of whom, like Leon Kennedy and Chris Redfield, cross over with each other for the first time in the mainline series, in a way that, combined with all the other bombast and spectacle, make this feel like an Avengers movie for the RE universe. Which, I'll be honest, is not something I would usually want for this series, but as a one-time thing, and as someone who really loves all these characters, it was really cool to see. On top of that, this game has an absolute fuckload of crazy bosses and enemy types that really push the envelope of what's possible in this world. Like a dude who can shapeshift into a mutant zombie dinosaur. or a giant lightning-infused octopus skeleton, among many, many more. Not all of these enemies hit the mark. Any of the enemies with guns, for example, just feel jank as hell to fight because the cover system is so awkward, but those are drowned out by the sheer variety of awesome-looking creatures on display here. The gameplay itself is also a ton of fun once you get used to how much different it is from the prior games. Playing the whole series back to back definitely caused me some whiplash here because of how much faster this one plays and how much more options are available in combat now, but finally getting into a proper flow state with this one really makes you feel unstoppable. There really is nothing like roundhousing, suplexing, and gun-fooing your way through a horde of zombies, especially with Jake Wesker, the son of series antagonist Albert Wesker and something of a hand-to-hand prodigy. His gameplay took the most getting used to because of that melee priority, but by the end of his campaign, he really feels like a beast to control. It's certainly not scary, but it's absolutely a ton of fun. The whole game is like a greatest hits compilation of every idea Resident Evil has ever tried at that point, but cranked up to 11. You have your classic zombies overrunning small-town America, a creepy church and graveyard setup that gives way to an Indiana Jones-style underground dungeon full of traps, gunfights and packed cityscapes, running from a Nemesis-style pursuer, secret Umbrella labs, military battleships, European snowfields, bombed-out war zones, ominous industrial areas and factories, and a non-stop barrage of awesome monster encounters and ridiculous set pieces tying them all together. It's actually mind-blowing how much variety is packed into this game. As I mentioned before, it really gives me the impression that this was meant to be the grand finale of the series, and it's honestly impressive how generous it is with its content. In addition to the 4 campaigns with totally unique characters, scenarios, areas, enemy types, and bosses, it also includes a full-fledged Mercenaries mode, which is like a high-score-based endless horde mode with a ton of maps and playable characters. And several multiplayer modes, which includes more traditional game types, as well as an asymmetric Nemesis hunt style mode, and a mode that lets you invade other players' story campaigns as one of several enemy types. Most of the online stuff is pretty inactive these days, but I was able to find a few matches here and there, and the fact that it's all included for free is amazing. Especially considering the way people talk about this game, as if it were a lazy, trend-chasing cash grab. I was just surprised to see how much there was to dig into here, and how polished and fun it all was to boot. And as far as the mostly dead online, I mean, the game is getting pretty close to 10 years old now, and it was never really all that popular to begin with, so I can let that slide. The plot too, while a bit convoluted, is a real treat for fans of this cast of characters. It's so cool to see these iconic series protagonists interact for the first time, and see how all of their individual storylines connect with each other at various points, and how certain events in the game are recontextualized based on whose perspective you're seeing it from. And since you can play these campaigns in any order, or even hop between them, each player is going to fill in that mental map of the overarching story in a different way, which may cause you to pick up on different details than someone who played them in a different order. Although I would strongly recommend playing Ada's campaign last, since even though it's unlocked from the get-go on current-gen versions of RE6, hers was originally meant to be unlocked after beating the rest of the storylines, and as such, it pretty casually spoils a lot of the reveals that are built up to a lot more dramatically in the rest of the game. A big part of the intrigue comes from slowly piecing together all the disparate parts you get in each campaign, which is really cool, so I'm not sure why they'd ruin that by letting you skip right to Ada. Maybe they figured since this release was a remaster, most people would be playing it for the second time and might want to jump right to that part if it happened to be their favorite, but in that case they should at least put a warning. But I digress. All things considered, I think Resident Evil 6 gets a bit too much of a bad rap. While it may have its fair share of issues, if you can look past the fact that it's not even a little bit scary and is much more of a horror-flavored shooter than an actual horror game, you've got yourself a hell of a fun roller coaster and a thrilling send-off to an underappreciated era in one of gaming's most iconic franchises. So if, like me, you're a longtime fan who was initially disappointed with this one and dismissed it as garbage a long time ago, I'd encourage you to have an open mind and maybe give it another shot. As long as you've prepared yourself for a drastically different experience than you'd usually get from an RE game and embrace just how silly it is, I think you may just enjoy yourself. And if you're new to the series and were thinking about maybe skipping RE6 because you heard it was terrible, you should definitely play it and form your own opinion. Who knows, it might even be your favorite. Probably not, but you never know till you try, right? Anyway, that's all I've got for you today, but let me know what you think of RE6 down in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what the consensus is these days. Is it underrated or is the hate justified? Also, don't forget to drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you want to see more stuff like this. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Greg, and I'll see you next time on Big and Stuff.